Fatherhood isn't easy, but in Autismland, it's a journey like no other. Join Mark de Grasse as we explore the highs, lows, and everything in between of raising children on the autism spectrum. With real stories, practical advice, and a touch of humor, we're here to navigate this unique journey together. For dads navigating life on the autism spectrum, you're not alone.
Hey everyone, I'm Mark de Grasse. Welcome to Dads in Autismland, where we talk everything autism, fatherhood, whether that's family, marriage, parenting dynamics, daily life, everything that you can do raising your autistic kiddos. So today I have a close friend of mine, Neal Tricarico, and we're going to be talking about his son, Anthony, and an event that has actually led to him creating an entire organization to help others that are going through the same situation. So welcome, Neal.
Thank you, Mark. I'm really honored to be here and so grateful for our friendship and all your support along the way. Thank you.
Oh no, I always loved working with you. Back when we were a digital marketer, and afterwards, just talking about marketing and sales. And I know that what you kind of went through kind of shifted the direction of everything that you do. And I'm just so happy we could still connect on things because I'm like, oh yes, Neal, he's always knowledgeable, and you're one of those people that I really see as like, okay, here's somebody who's like emotionally connected and really open with your friends. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, so let's talk about Anthony, kind of where it started in terms of the diagnosis and what that kind of meant for him growing up.
Yeah, sure. So, initially we just started to notice something was different or off. Even though Anthony was our first child and we were first time parents, something just seemed different and off. And at 4 years old, Anthony was diagnosed with anxiety. And then things seemed to, progress. And around 6, we came back one day and Anthony had pulled a big chunk of his hair out. He had a big circular bald spot. And this was when we were first struck with like, hey, maybe there's something more to this. And that's when he was first diagnosed with high functioning autism spectrum disorder. What used to be known as Asperger's now fits into the spectrum. I mean, we all know as parents of autistic kids, to know one kid with autism is to know one kid with autism. But that was his diagnosis, and with that came some relief, but also a path that we hadn't planned for or anticipated really.
No, I could imagine that, and it's always those little signs. I mean, that's a big sign,
Yeah,
ripping
yeah.
hair. Like, okay, I haven't seen any kids do this before. And did you notice any other kind of quirks? I know with Damien, he was our first, and so when he was doing some things, I was kind of like, well, he's just different than other kids. That's okay. Were there other like smaller indicators that now you look back and you're like, oh, okay, that was probably part of it?
Yeah, another one that was, I would say, bigger is, we enjoyed reading bedtime stories so much. And at a certain point, some of the stories like, Good Night Moon and some of these stories, I mean, as parents, they could be emotional. And my wife would get kind of emotional sometimes reading to Anthony. And he would say to her from time to time, he'd look at her and say, Mommy, please use your normal reading voice.
Mm.
So it was like the emotion that she was expressing or feeling or was happening, he was uncomfortable with. And so that was an interesting piece for us. Yeah, and then just especially once the diagnosis, I mean, he had a lot of sensitivities to
Mm.
clothes, materials, and things like that. And he went through different phases, little figurines, and he would just rub them
Mm.
raw. Also, I mean, looking back on it, it's a fond memory for me. But we were like kind of concerned at the time, but we leaned into it. He would only wear Adidas tracksuits. So we had a
Mm.
blue one, a black one, a white one, a purple one, and for a few years like that was it. And then just little things, even like from his fourth birthday, we took him to a water park, and that was awesome. Then it was okay, birthday equals water park. And so that
Mm.
was a tradition, and a very cool tradition. I loved it, especially if it fell during the week to take time off and take him to the water park. But I think about 15, he was finally like, hey, Dad, I think we grew out of this. So just a lot of early on, just very, very black and white. And, as he progressed and certainly into adolescence and teenage years, that became really intense and challenging.
No, I can see that would be challenging because I've seen pictures of Anthony. I'm like, oh, it just looks like a happy guy, and you wouldn't
Yeah.
really see the autism because sometimes with Damien, we're kind of it sounds weird, but we're kind of glad he looks so obviously autistic, and
Yeah.
in that way we could say like, oh yeah, this is different and people approach it different versus say getting offended or having something that you deal with a say a neurotypical, interaction. Did you find that was difficult or what was that like?
Very, very interesting point. Yes, because to a person, whether it was, the Adventure Guides camping program through the YMCA from ages 5 to 11, people just didn't know or realize. And when I would share it with them, they were they were shocked. And
Mm,
later when we talk about sort of the teenage years in this event, he did a really great job of learning to camouflage that. And
mm.
so, you know, yeah, it did present a bit of a challenge. And just it really resonates with me what you're saying, how that might be easier because I'd have to, explain a lot, and it was very confusing for him. Um, yeah,
Yeah, well, you see, just from a parent perspective, it's kind of like because you hate to identify people as something, but sometimes you have parents that are overly protective, or they'll say, "Oh no, my kid has this issue and this issue and this issue," and they use it as like almost like a defense mechanism for
yes,
anything that their child does wrong. So I'm
yeah,
guessing you may have been put in that category as like, "Oh, you're just one of those parents that's like too much," and you know,
yeah. I mean, it. I think looking back on it, for all of us, the outer world seemed very normal or neurotypical. I mean, most wouldn't know. We didn't talk about it. Any of the how people experienced Anthony seemed very common or normal, if you will. But for us at home, it was a significant challenge. The black and white
Mm,
thinking, the anxiety, you know, to a large degree, the lack of acceptance of his sister and blame. And so, while the outside world, it was easier to just it never came up unless it came up. There was
mhm.
some situation that warranted some sort of explanation. But at home, it was a big part of our life, day in and day out.
Mhm. Ah, no, that's a great point. And I think, well, and I look at that and I'm like, oh, for me, like I run into that issue sometimes, like, oh, you have an autistic son. It's like, yeah, it takes up like 90% of my time. Like,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it's almost like it's shocking to you because you're like, of course, yeah, it's like part of my identity. But again, if you have like, well, because my son, like, he's on a device when we go to say a baseball game, and it looks like, oh, he's just a kid who's into, Monsters Inc. or something, and they don't see it, and so they don't see the everything else that goes behind the scenes, and maybe you're tired, and that's a reason why. And but as just a guy, you don't want to be making excuses, and you don't want to be complaining, and so you end up just kind of containing that situation, which is
yes.
why we have this show, so we could talk about
Y-
it.
Yes, I'm so grateful that you and we have this show. What a powerful space for us men and fathers and husbands, to be able to speak openly about it and share our experience.
So how did you, because I mean that's lonely, that kind of
Yeah.
situation because people can't see it and you might not even want to inform people of it all the time. How did you kind of cope with that dichotomy of like I'm this way outside and maybe even for your son, his, the
Yeah.
masking that they do. How did you handle that?
Yeah, great question. I mean, early on, I was sad because I didn't realize it, but um, I always wanted to have a son, and I enjoyed my dad so much and the things that we shared, like throwing a ball or playing sports or going to sports. And those things weren't interesting to him. And I struggled with that early on. I struggled. I was glad that he was interested in trying sports. So, he
Mm.
tried soccer and that was pretty cool because running and stuff, it didn't seem to require as much coordination. And then when we got to baseball, it's pretty obvious, like throwing a ball, catching a ball. That just wasn't his his gifts. And luckily early on, his coaches were really embracing and made him feel
Mm.
a part of, and it was special. But I think the first biggest decision I had to make that sort of changed my life was to mourn that, you know, it wasn't going to be the son that I dreamt of, but it created this opportunity to explore what would be things that he would be interested in and that we might be interested in together.
No,
Excuse me.
that's no, I get, why you get choked up about that because you
Yeah,
go through this whole, the vision of that you had for your life and then what actually happened and for you, how it ended. And I think that's just part of it. It is
yeah,
saying like, hey, here's the expectation. It's not going to happen. And then what can we do moving forward? And it might not be as typical, but it could still be great. So that's
still be
amazing.
great.
Well, and you got to try it at least, which is,
Yeah.
a lot of fun too.
And what's powerful is I think a lot of the things that he did thrive in, we kind of stumbled upon, like rock climbing.
Oh.
I'm afraid of heights, and I'm claustrophobic. Like rock climbing is the furthest from my jam. But I know I brought up the adventure guides, and I can't thank that program enough for the time I got to spend with my son and the relationship I got to develop with him. But like through that, one of the campouts was at Joshua Tree and they had rock climbing, right? And
Mhm.
so they had like the 5-year-old ropes, the 10-year-old ropes, the adult ropes. And he just did the 5-year-old and then just walked over to the 10-year-old and did that. And it just, I guess he assumed it was a progression and then went over and did the adult one. And the guides like pulled me aside. They're like, hey, your son is gifted in rock climbing. I was like, oh, wow,
Wow.
okay, okay. And he really enjoyed it and joined a rock climbing gym, I think at 6, and took to rock climbing. And for that high functioning mind, the strategy of the
Mm.
moves to get up to the top. And so then it just became a tradition whenever we went out on that camp out for Joshua Tree, he and I would go a day earlier. I hired a private guide from that organization, and he did a or a half day of rock climbing Joshua Tree, and then we would camp with the tribe, and then the 3 ropes, and so we did find things like that, and especially martial arts early
Mm.
on, same kind of thing was really, really good for him. And those, were individual sports, but I was so glad that he found something and that I was able to participate in some way in the things that he enjoyed.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I didn't know about the rock climbing. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And it actually does kind of fit that because, it's almost like you have to be a perfectionist as you're doing that because if
Yeah.
you aren't, you're going to be falling a lot and that's not fun. For us, Damien, it's funny because Damien's super athletic. He's like because I was a trainer and I worked with like soldiers and athletes and MMA fighter, all these guys. I'm just like, man, he knows how to position his body right. He knows how to do things. So that actually gave me a great idea. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never even explored those things because anything with the ball, he's kind of like, and he'll catch the ball. Okay. He'll even dribble it now and they'll just pass it back and then
Oh,
he'll leave.
cool.
And
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
like,
yeah. Done.
if they're not interested, they're not going to fake it for you, which is kind of cool, in terms of knowing, because sometimes you kind of want, wow, there's some dads out there that get too into the baseball, and whether the kids like it or not, you're going to be an MLB star. Like,
Yes. Yeah.
no.
And I don't know if you found this, but at some point, like sort of soon after that, there was a freedom. Like I went from sort of disappointment and feeling sorry for myself to a real effort to let go and accept. And then there was a freedom, like to like, a lot of the parents and God bless them, like all the weekends and the travel ball and the stresses and the things. And eventually there was like a freedom, like, oh, okay, I've got this, but I don't have that.
Hmm.
In in terms of the drama, the travel, the competition, the pressure. Um, Pressure came in different ways later, but
Hmm. No, and I think that's true too. And like I said, it's like some kids will put on their own, and neurotypical kids will put on a mask and be like, "Yeah, dad loves baseball, so I'm going to love baseball because I love my
yeah,
dad," kind of thing. Versus
yeah,
like, do you actually enjoy that? That's why I was like, my other son actually is the baseball kid, and I'm still like, you're having fun, right? Like you're not just doing this, because
yeah,
he's like, oh, I do this every day. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's cool. I wasn't into baseball, so I'm kind of like, I've had to learn it. Actually, baseball just clicked for me in the last like 7 days, where I'm like, okay, I think I understand all of it now. Finally, all the rules. It's been like what, 6 years of heavy baseball, and I finally get it. But no, it's good, and I'm just happy when he's happy. So I think that's another thing that you could, with your, and you have a neurotypical child too, so how to do it.
yes, yeah,
Well, let's get into the just the stressful stuff, because I know that
yeah.
the anxiety part had a big impact, and kind of how that led up to what happened, and then your new organization.
Yeah, I'm grateful to be able to share it. So, early on with the diagnosis, we were grateful to find a center, and the first center we went to was called Case Center for Autism Spectrum. I don't remember what the E was, but it was a beautiful combination of ABA, which is the typical traditional route, if you will, but then they incorporated other things which were really powerful. So Anthony would work with young men mostly, and was learning and going through this process, but it involved like going out and fishing and playing video games and doing great things. And that center was amazing. Um, Unfortunately, it had to close because insurance, only approves ABA as the de facto only way to approach autism. So we found another center called Card, and it was amazing as well. Same kind of thing. I mean, the services were so great for him. 3, 4 days a week, a couple times a month. We would meet with the director, and by and large, he was thriving. You know, and some of the things that they prepared us for was that with this particular diagnosis, he could struggle making friends. He could have a likelihood of being bullied. And I think, you know, luckily our story didn't include that. And in fact, looking back on it, I think, he worked so hard at fitting in that he was blessed with the numerous friends that loved him and cared for him, and that he did cool stuff with, and he thrived. I had initially decided to with I mean, not convinced my wife, but explained to my wife, my son is born a day after me, August 4th, and when I grew up playing sports, like I love sports, baseball, football. But by the time I got to high school, everyone got bigger and better. And so, in preparation, since he was right on the cusp, like, oh, let's hold him back a year. Let's have him start schooling a year. Well, what we also noticed during this time was because athletics weren't his thing, he was quite bright. This is when we realized his double gift, if you will, is brightness. And so that he went to Montessori charter school. The Montessori program was tremendous for him. I can't recommend that approach enough for children with autism. And they impressed upon us, because of his brightness, we'd be doing a disservice to keep him in this grade. So he skipped a grade, and
Oh, wow.
quite frankly, those years during that work was amazing. And then around seventh or eighth grade or sixth or seventh grade, they met with us and explained that in essence he had graduated out. And
Wow.
everyone was excited. Like, he hit these things. I mean, it certainly doesn't mean he didn't have high functioning autism, but he had learned the skills and tools and strategies to live in this world. He had an IEP, but never used it because he didn't want to be treated differently. And he excelled in school. For me, it was quite interesting to concerning. I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, like sixth, seventh grade here, like we're headed into puberty, high school, like this organization had been our lifeline to understand and navigate these challenges. But by and large, everyone was so happy and celebrating. It was a big deal, and so that was fine. Then we head into high school and or eighth grade and COVID. And
Oh,
I want to be really sure. I just share these as experiences. I don't place blame. You'll see as I share this, there's a stacking of things. But COVID was really a tremendous setback for our son, much more so than we realized at the time. And but we realized it pretty significantly. When my daughter's in the backyard dancing, doing things, freedom, not going to school, he was literally in bed, depressed,
mm,
depressed. And that was ultimately when he was diagnosed with depression, like not being able to go see his friends, not being able to go play, not being able to go fish. I mean, the fact that the places where we used to fish now had police tape where you couldn't
mm,
enter, and it had gotten so gnarly that finally I was like, hey, this is silly. I got to get him out. We got to go fishing. We got to do some things. And COVID has impacted all of our worlds in the most tremendous way, but that was a significant setback. And then, you head into freshman year. He was at a new school, and like I said, amazing. He worked so hard at and developed these wonderful friendships, and we come to know that most of those friends didn't realize that he was on the spectrum
mm,
in any way, shape, or form. But unfortunately, around spring break, or no, not no, yeah, spring break, his freshman year, we got a call from his best friend's mom, or one of his best friends. He had numerous best friends, and she said, I just need to share this with you. But my son shared with me that Anthony shared with him that he has suicidal thoughts.
mm,
And we were shocked. We were floored. Not at any part of our journey with autism had that ever come up as a possibility. Certainly you kind of generally aware of teenage boys and concerns about COVID, but we were floored and grateful that his friend shared that with his mom at tremendous risk to himself, because Anthony wasn't happy that he had confided in his friend and he had shared, but obviously, God bless him, that was all the right thing to do. We called the 988 number, went into school, met with the counselor. They do an assessment. Ideation is a different threshold than having a plan, but we now become aware of it,
mm,
this concern. And, we we got a counselor and we were in communication with him, and things seemed pretty good. We were able to talk about it, and from the outside looking in, Anthony would seem to be thriving. He was excelling in school. He had a 4.6 grade point average, multiple AP classes. By this time now, was a black belt in karate. He was each year wanted to do something different. So did jujitsu, then Muay Thai. And he would go to the gym every morning from at 5:30. He was the first one up, go to the gym, and you're looking at it. It's like, okay, he's got friends. He's going to parties, hosting parties. He's healthy and eating well. He's got tremendous grades. He's got the ideas of being a Navy SEAL, and just your friends are sharing, wow, Anthony's amazing, and you're like, wow, this is amazing, but also, like I was sharing, as a child, the home life was very challenging. It was very rigid, intensely black and white, and exceedingly each accomplishment that he achieved seemed to have less and less fulfillment. And it was almost like, the science of achievement is like we achieve, we strive, we drive. But when you have that accomplishment, what we're really after is that art of fulfillment, that meaning that it brings. And we began to get concerned because with each new achievement, there seemed to be less fulfillment. So I know it's quite a long story, but then you go to the next spring. Spring now, his sophomore year, and we had an amazing spring break together. Another thing that we picked up when he was 13 was he enjoyed snowboarding. Snowboarding is my favorite thing to do on the planet. So this was something that he and I were able to bond over. As soon as he said he was interested, it bought us all both the gear. I had taken 13 years off, and it was something we really enjoyed together. So the spring break, his sophomore year, I think the first part of the week he did something with a friend and his dad. And the second half, I took him and his buddies snowboarding to Mammoth. We had this amazing time, and I would do that a lot with him and his buddies. I'm so grateful to get them to take them so many times. When he came back, he was very distraught, very panicked about AP class, overwhelmed, exhausted. And this was a pattern that we saw from about seventh grade, through high school, where it was so intense, this intense black and white thinking, and this exhaustion. And so you've heard the term HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. When we as neurotypical humans have that experience, it's exhausting. But for him, it always seemed much, much more. We couldn't put our finger on it. We've came to learn about it later, which I'll share with you. But it was this deep, profound exhaustion. And actually, we came to learn it's called camouflaging. All that work to fitting in creates so much exhaustion. So you put that on top of HALT, and pretty significant. So he comes to my wife and says, I need help. I need to be admitted somewhere. And we were like, yeah, I mean, Anthony, whatever you need, like, admitted where, for what, we didn't know what he meant. And he said, I'm having suicidal thoughts. I need to go into a facility. I need to leave, my life and go somewhere and get better. And so, we were like, okay, so we called 988 again. Someone comes out, they do the assessment. He's got ideation, but not a plan. So he is not, he hasn't met the threshold to be admitted somewhere. So then we have someone else come out, same kind of thing. So we're like, hey, Anthony, you know, the you're we're helping you. We're going to get you help. You're not able to go into one of these facilities, because this is how it works. And he said something to the effect of, like, I just need you to find one. Like, I just need you to find one. Like, I have to go in. So we found a center, or a mental health facility for teens, and it was full, but they agreed to meet with us. And on the drive down, he said to both of us, he said, I know what I need to do and say here to get admitted. I just want to let you know that. And it just was unspoken. We knew what he was going to say. He was going to tell them a plan.
Mm.
And so sure enough, we go, and they take him back and they come out and they're like, your son has a plan to take his life. We need to admit him now. We don't have a bed for him, but we've got a room that we could put him in until a bed opens up. And that set that process in motion where he was in that system. They medicated him. Unfortunately, he shared this with us, but they put him in like a padded room, I guess, where we're almost like solitary,
Mhm.
until they had a room for him. When he was in group with other kids, they were sharing with him ideas of how to take his life. Um, these folks were preparing us that this would be part of our life. We would be continuing to come back. And within a couple days, he was calling us, begging us to take him out, to get him out of there. And that was tough because once you're admitted, now it's like you don't get to just take them out. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to agree against medical advice to take them out, and they could decide to keep them in. So now we're in this tricky area. They agree if he does these certain things, he can be released. He does those things. I remember that day very vividly, walking out. It was a beautiful spring day, and to just see him take this big deep breath and exhale and look around and say, I don't ever want to go back there again, never doing that again. And we had this sense of like maybe he was scared straight kind of thing. And
Mm.
and so we had a plan. We were going to do outside work. And but he shared on the way back something that really concerned us. He said, I'm never going to tell you guys again if I have suicidal thoughts. And that crushed us.
Oh, I can imagine.
And
Well,
so, yeah, go ahead.
oh, no. If you're good, keep
Yeah,
going.
I'm good. All right. So then you fast forward to spring his junior year, and now my wife and I are like, okay, hey, there seems to be some weird seasonality to it. And during that year, okay, we met regularly with a therapist who worked on and off with him, worked with us. Now he was even more dedicated to his own health and well-being. So in addition to doing exercise in the morning, he added Spartan races and marathons. So every afternoon he was swimming, running, doing obstacles. He would do these camps like for Navy SEALs training, and it was like for adults starting at age 16. He was the first 16-year-old to complete the program. But it just seemed so good for him. All this vigorous exercise, marathons, things. He took sugar out of his diet because he wanted to eat well because he didn't want to take medications. Um, and even our conversations, if he got depressed or concerned, he had different coping mechanisms. He'd say, "I'm going to go for a walk and get some fresh air." And he'd walk up the street to his little girlfriends or just do that. And so things seemed under control, if you will, but we just wanted to anticipate spring break. So a few weeks before we met with him and we said, hey, buddy, spring break's coming up. We really want to get out in front of it this year. We want you to have an amazing time, but also support you in managing your energy and mental health. And we just kind of all agreed about it. And then about 3 weekends before spring break, my wife and I went on a trip together to Palm Springs, a lovely couples weekend. And I just remember so vividly, just hand in hand, sharing how grateful we were that Anthony seemed to be in a good shape. Our daughter seemed to be in a good shape and just blessed and grateful. And as we're driving back, Anthony calls his mother and says, Mom, I'm really down. I'm really depressed. Like, when are you coming back? And we came back and yeah, I mean, he seemed down and depressed a bit more than maybe in the past, but it seemed sort of in line with what we'd experienced. And we talked with him and we invited him to dinner with us and to enjoy some time with us and just really tried to be there for us. And one thing that was different, usually he would close his door, he left his door open, but we found so much in what was working for him was to give him space. And the
Mm.
biggest challenge in all this, Mark, is we could not ever tell with any real clarity where autism started and ended
Mm.
and where being a teenager started and ended. It was very challenging. So we gave him the space, and we were just enjoying a show on the couch with our daughter, but thinking about him. And he walked by and said, "Hey, I'm just gonna go for some fresh air." And we were like, "Great, that sounded good." But Mark, I had this sense in my gut
Mm.
that something was the matter, and I tracked him on my phone, which I always did whenever he said that, and he seemed to stop up the street around the corner, and appeared he was sitting on a curb. And my wife and I were just debating whether we should go to him or just give him the space, because every time before, that's what he needed. And so we were thinking through that and debating through that, and no sooner than that, we heard sirens and her phone rang, and it was a police officer. And I didn't even hear what they said. I ran up there and saw the ambulance go by, and all they shared with us was that our son had a pulse, and he had made a different decision that night than to um, get some fresh air, and he took his life. A passerby found him, and the paramedics came, and they were able to revive him, but his brain injuries were pretty significant. And I'll pause there. There's a whole experience after that, but
No,
that was our story.
well, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, it's yeah, I can't even imagine how difficult that situation must have been. And and I could hear it, just the like, what could we have done different? And I think
Mhm.
that's always the the question you have as parents, because it's well, we all do it all the time, where you
Yeah.
go back and you're like, okay, what could I have done different? But it sounds like, I mean, you guys, gave him so much care and attention, and tried to do it. And I think at the end of the day, there is just a disconnect between what you think is a neurotypical and what you think is a, somebody on the spectrum, because it's just different, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and sometimes you think, like, how much are they accommodating us, as much as we think we're accommodating them, or it's like, I think I understand you. And for somebody like Anthony, where it sounds like he was extraordinary in so many different facets, where you would have a disconnect with other parents too, because you'd probably be like, how are you complaining about anything? I can't get my son to stop playing video games to go outside for 5 minutes, and your son's doing buds training and climbing, rock
Right.
faces and doing awesome in
Right. So,
school.
so you think, like, how can I be complaining or concerned? And yeah, you said something very interesting that I've come to realize so recently in this, is like, how much are they accommodating us? And I just come to know how much of that rings true as it relates to Anthony.
Mm. Well, and what else are you gonna do?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's you try to connect. It's well, because I think about my neurotypical son Declan too, because he's super smart, and sometimes you're just like, I don't think he's telling me the truth. Like, I
Yeah.
think he's saying what he knows I want to hear, and and then you want to say, like, well, how do I be more open? Because, they're trying to avoid some conversation they don't want to have, or, something they don't understand, or maybe they don't even know how to describe it. And so it's just a disconnect. But yeah, no, it sounds like you guys did a lot, and did a lot of the right steps too. It wasn't like, because sometimes you always think of the parents where it's like, oh, well, what did they do wrong? Like, that's the first thing that comes to mind. And it's like, no, this is, you guys did everything positive, and we're completely open. And yeah, so that's got to be even more difficult. But thank you for sharing that, because that's,
Yeah.
it just
It's
the
important,
journey.
very important to us, and to share and help in any way we can.
No, and I think I think you're doing it too. I mean, I
Mhm.
think you've been, I teach branding. That's my other job. And I'm like, man, you guys have really, you got the mission, and you have the messaging, and you're super dedicated. And, you haven't mentioned this, but you're a top tier sales trainer and marketer. And you've taken all that and kind of convert it into this other mission, which I think is fantastic. So if you want to talk about that, I'd love to
Yeah,
hear.
but I would love to share about it, and I'm grateful. It's all happened by divine intervention, universal intervention, whatever you want to call it. But we had this experience over the course of 9 weeks where Anthony was hospitalized at Rady Children's Hospital, and Rady is a little slice of heaven here on earth. His MRI came back and showed that if he survives, he would be likely to not be able to speak, see, or walk.
Mm.
And it was pretty significant and devastating, that meeting. But also, what was powerful is as soon as we walked through that, they literally said, "We're going to set the MRI aside. Anthony is not his MRI. Hand to God, miracles happen here at Rady, and our focus is on saving Anthony and seeing if we could create some level of a quality of life for him." So we were all in, but we were scared, afraid, alone, living across the street at Ronald McDonald House. And within 3 days, a couple things happened. One is one of my clients who runs the core mastermind group spun up she calls it an all faiths prayer circle, just a gathering on Zoom where people can pray or intend or share and send love to Anthony and to us. And I think there were 75 people. We had nothing to do with it. And the experience was so magical and beautiful. It seemed to impact Anthony. It seemed to impact us. Most importantly, it seemed to have a profound impact on my wife. And so every Sunday now, during that time, in the evening, at the time of when he took his life, someone would lead this all faiths welcome prayer circle, and there'd be 50 to north of hundreds of 100 plus people, and certainly towards the end there were people coming we didn't even know. But what we came to realize during this time was through Anthony's story and sharing was this beautiful experience across all these religious beliefs or non-beliefs. So Christianity, Catholicism, Judaism, um, Buddhism, the Zohar, atheist. People were sharing through the lens of their beliefs, but as it was received for us was just pure love, pure love. And the experience was tremendous. And it had such a profound impact on our healing. And people would share their gifts. We had no fewer than 3 gifts of mediumship that enabled us to, and I was like, medium, like I'm so skeptical, but it helped us so much to be able to communicate with Anthony and understand where he was really actually at. And ultimately, when we had to make that difficult decision to take him off of life-saving support, it's the most difficult decision in our life, we were doing it with him. And it created this energy of love and community. And my daughter just came up with the word endurant, which means capable of overcoming adversity and hardship. And she liked it because it also had Ant in it. So Anthony actually went by Ant. It was this nickname,
Mm.
but it resonated with him so much. Like he went into his school and had them change his name. So every year, like his teachers called him Ant, like that was his name, not his nickname. And so there was this energy that was created that transcended beyond his transition. So ultimately, May 25th, he transitioned, and there was a bit of suffering for him at the end there that was very hard for us. So we were relieved. He was no longer suffering. He was in heaven. We were certain of this. And we were getting so much feedback that all of our sharing was helping.
Mm.
And so we continued to do that and have continued to do that. And then some other things became really clear to us, Mark, as it related to autism, that there's a significant gap between autism and neurodiversity training and treatment and support and mental health and suicide. So, like I mentioned, without judgment, nowhere and all the things that we were prepared for or were taught to anticipate that Anthony could experience. Did suicide ever come up? And whenever we worked in the traditional areas of mental health, these folks were not trained in neurodiversity. And again, we don't blame, but someone reached out to me, this beautiful woman, Shannon Decker from the Speedy Foundation, reached out to me and started to plant this seed of this correlation. And we started to research it. And we came to know that, yeah, the only ones looking at it are in the United Kingdom. And then we got a beautiful letter from our, I wish I still had it, a card from the director of the first center. And she had seen our social media and she had shared like this is a this is a known significant gap, and I'm so taken by it. I've enrolled in mental health courses. So we started to explore this idea and met other people and did deep research. And in fact, it's a pretty significant gap. And when you start to stack the high degree children with autism spectrum disorder are 9 times more likely to take their lives than any other group. They are the highest group in terms of completion. So when that black and white mind decides they're done, like they're done. It's not like for attention or an attempt. And we're so blessed that USA Today found us, did an article on this. There's a beautiful doctor, Dr. Gupta in Philadelphia, who's doing some great work. And all he's done is said, hey, let's look at taking the D out of this autism spectrum. You have brown eyes, I have brown eyes, my wife has blue eyes. There's a difference. But when we put that label of disorder, we've now labeled them and told them something's wrong and that they need help and work. And this struck my wife and I to our core, because as we went through Anthony's stuff and found journals, so much of what he wrote about is how different he was and the disorder and the autism. And it broke our heart to hear this, but to have this doctor share that just by talking with these kids and helping them understand and setting aside the D and helping them embrace their differences and helping them find their tribes, even so much as sharing that Elon Musk is high functioning. So, man, I could go on for hours and hours, and I'm so grateful for the platform. But what has come of this is just through the grace of God, spirit, universe, whatever you and your audience believes in, all of it's true. A mentor of mine, actually, Tony Robbins, I worked for Tony Robbins a number of years. He reached out early on and he said, you and Samar are being called to something greater. And I know it's hard, but please keep your eyes open for new mentors, new cohorts, new friends. And all of that is coming on blast. And then old friends and mentors will show up, but you have to keep your eyes open for them. You're being called to something greater. And moments later, we walk outside and we bump into this woman who was a friend of Anthony's mom, who we didn't know. And we bumped into her at Rady's, and we had this touching moment with her. And before we left, she said, hey, I don't know if this is going to sound weird, and I know it's a very difficult time, but keep your eyes out. There are angels here on earth who are here to support you now more than ever. And so what I'd impress upon you, Mark, and I don't know how woo-woo your audience is, but in a very real way, everything is happening because of that opening and that call to something greater, whether it's advocacy at Capitol Hill or a potential partnership with the #2 autism healthcare provider in the nation. We have a director. We launched, or we're launching. Actually, I'm not sure when this will drop, but March 24th
No, we're getting it out
is the
today.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, then we're launching our movement and nonprofit March 25th at 5 p.m., where we've established a full 501c3 whose sole mission is to close the gap between neurodiversity and suicide and mental health, to speak about it openly, to remove the stigmatism, and to support research and advocacy so that we can keep these children from passing. When you stack teenage boy, autism, and COVID. It turns out Anthony was over 60% likely to do this. And we, that is not something that any of us should be comfortable with. And my wife and I feel this call, and I've taken my God-given talents of influence and connection and put them towards this movement. This is something that meant a lot to Anthony. Anthony was so aware of his suicidal ideation that his plan for his senior project was on suicide prevention.
Mm.
And in fact, this warmed and broke our heart every day at the hospital at 8 in the morning. His Apple iPhone reminder would go off and it said, find a volunteer for suicide prevention. Every morning was a daily reminder. So this is now being led from him, through heaven, folks that are showing up. This woman left her job at another beautiful mental health nonprofit that is going to be okay to volunteer to lead this for us. So that's where we are. And our hope is to, as Anthony shared with us, to carry this amount of pain with us for a larger good, to save and impact lives. And endurance the endurantmovement.org is up, and we're launching March 24th.
Oh man, that's incredible. It's funny because I talk about this stuff all the time, and it's the mental health issue, not just for autistic kids, but just for parents. I'm always looking at dads, of course, and it resonates there too. And I think the biggest thing is kind of what you said, where if you don't treat autism as a disorder instead of as just a different way of thinking or a different type of person, then it actually destigmatizes that, and maybe this stuff wouldn't happen as often. I knew some of the statistics, but some of the things you said, I was like, oh my gosh, that's why hasn't this well, yeah, I'll tell you why. In terms of the severe side is so much work just to make any kind of progress, that it's like, oh, now I need to worry about mental health too. It's like, but if we just start there, that mental health, not just especially for the autistic people, but also for the people who are helping along the way, is so vital. And I think what you guys are doing is incredible. And I'm not sure how woo-woo my audience is, but personally, I think there is meaning in everything that we do in our lives. And as horrible as some of those things may be, if the net effect is supposed to be, hey, it improves or it saves people, or and I say saves people, and I'm not just talking about depressed people, but it impacts all of us. Like
It does.
we, it's not just about survival. It's about, how do you, have a good life, in the meantime. It's not all work. And
Yes.
that's something that's new for me too, because I've always been a worker, and I'm like, you know what? I don't know if hard work does do everything. Maybe we're missing the point.
Yeah, if I found anything in this whole experience, because like you, I'm a hard worker and an achiever, and feel like to accomplish, I've got to, achieve, but being knocked down to the mat, and for a while there, unable to get up, and now at my best days to get to just a strong, sturdy one knee. It's just that not working, that letting go, that stillness, the being, like, so much really comes in. So our journey has been spiritual in nature, the works that must be done, because spiritual and work, meaningful work without action is just, it's kumbaya. And that
Hmm.
the action is to have and impact real meaningful change. And just the last thing I would share, the significance of March 24th is the 1 year anniversary of Anthony's suicide. While he ultimately transitioned May 25th, it's an important date for us.
No, that's that gives it a lot of weight and meaning. And, I think all of that matters. I think, your feelings about the situation matters, the feelings of everybody that's been, through this journey with you, that matters. And the more we could tie, making a change to that, those big events, I think the more impactful it's going to be. So I wish you luck, and we're definitely
Thank
going to
you.
get this up today. So if you're listening to this on the 17th, that's when we recorded it. But I love what you're doing, and I love how you're using all that pain to make a difference in other people's lives, and I'm positive it's going to save people. So thank you for doing it.
Thank you, Mark. That's our guiding principle, is to transform this pain into meaningful purpose. And thank you on behalf of dads of autistic children. What you're doing here on the platform you've created is most meaningful, and I'm honored to be a part of it. And thank you for the platform today. I'm super grateful for you, man, and all the work you're doing.
Well, you're doing an awesome job, Neil. I think your journey's incredible. It's even more incredible that you're willing to, come out here and talk about it, and then incredible on top of that to put together a whole organization to help other families that are going through this, and possibly change everybody's perception of how we deal with autism. Because a lot of times, just like you said, it's if you stop treating it like a problem to fix, and instead just a situation that you're accommodating, just like we do with many, many other things, taxes, that's a situation we accommodate and we hate it. Not that
Yeah,
we
we do.
hate this, but we're willing to do so much work on other things. And it's like, no, this is something that's much more important than that. And we should dedicate our time to it. So thank you so much. I wish you luck with the event. I'll be there, and
Thank
we'll
you.
be, promoting the crap out of this, so you get some attention, at least from our small but significant audience of autism dads.
I'm so grateful. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you much. And thank you so much for listening. This has been the Dads and Autism Land podcast. If you want to support this community, this is exactly what we're trying to accomplish with this, which is meaningful dialogue that hopefully changes lives and changes people's perception of the situation itself, raising autistic kids, and being in relationships with autistic people. It is a broad range, and there are severe cases like my son, but there's also the cases like Neil's son, where looks like a superstar on the outside, and it may be a struggle every single day, and that's why it appears that way. But us understanding it more is going to give us a great opportunity to address it, and the more we talk about it and are honest about both the situations and how we feel about them, the more progress we're going to make. So we're going to continue to encourage that, and I hope you'll subscribe, because we do this all the time, and you'll hear it again next time on Dads and Autism Land.